My name is Susan Miller. I'm 47 years old. I've been married to John for 25 years. Our family includes John, who is also 47, and our daughter Emily, who is in high school. But something happened because of John that almost broke our family apart. It all began when John forgot his phone at home one day when he went to work. He's always on that thing during meals. It's no wonder he leaves it behind sometimes. When I picked up his phone, I saw messages from a woman I didn't know. Are you coming over today or staying with your wife? I need to talk to you, Mia, so please come over. What is all this? I panicked as I read the shocking messages. Then my husband John, realizing he'd forgotten his phone, returned home. Do you know where my phone is? It looks like I left it at home. Come on, if you have it, just give it back. I'm going to be late for work. What's going on? Who's this legal wife? And who's Mia? When I confronted him, John seemed surprised at first but then sighed heavily and began to explain. I was planning to tell you about this. I had everything prepared, but I guess getting caught now is probably the right timing. The right timing? What do you mean? Just like you're thinking, I have a mistress. Those messages you saw were from her. What? You've been cheating? For how long? I guess it's been over 15 years now. Over 15 years? Yeah, her daughter is in junior high school now. She's technically my child. She would be Emily's half-sister. She's facing high school entrance this year. It's going to be tough. So I'm planning to divorce you and marry her. I intend to support my daughter as a father. I couldn't understand what John was saying at all. Daughter Emily is your daughter too, isn't she? Don't you care about her? I didn't say I didn't care about her. Emily has been my precious daughter for 17 years too, but I don't plan to take her with me. It would be awkward to have a daughter who's not biologically related to her mother and the family, you know. Everyone would feel uncomfortable. So I'll leave Emily to you. In return, I'll make sure to pay child support until she graduates from college. And if Emily reaches out, I'll be willing to talk. So that should be fine, right? Are you serious? I'm dead serious. In fact, I think I'm offering a pretty good deal. Oh, and here, I shouldn't forget to give this to you. What's this? I've already filled in my part, so just write down yours and submit it. Let me know once you file the divorce papers. I'll come to pick up my stuff once the divorce is finalized. Wait a minute. What are you saying? You're not coming back. Yeah, I'll be living at her place from now on. I'll talk to my folks. You just take care of Emily and don't do anything unnecessary. Well then, thanks for the last 25 years. Take care. Hey, just wait. John handed me a divorce paper and left the house in his usual attire for work. I'm sure her place must have been prepared with all the living necessities for him. How could this? What am I supposed to do now? What's wrong? Why are you upset so early in the morning? Did something happen? My daughter Emily, who was home for the school holiday, came over to me as I was feeling distressed. I shouldn't have burdened her with such heavy news, but in that moment, I ended up telling her everything. Dad has a mistress. He gave me this and left. What? Cheating? And this is a divorce paper? Is Dad serious about this? Why would he? He apparently has another child with his mistress. A child? So I have a half-sister? Yes, from another mother. And what did he say about it? He said he'll pay child support to take care of you. What about apologies to you? Well, you're the one most affected, Mom, and there are no apologies. What is he thinking? After hearing my story, Emily bit her lip, thinking for a moment before responding. I see. If Dad's going to act like this, then we'll have to come up with our own plan. Huh? What do you mean? Don't worry, it's nothing dangerous. Since Dad seems to have no remorse for betraying us for over 15 years, we'll make sure he deeply regrets what he did. But of course, that requires some planning. But Mom, you're not blaming yourself for Dad's actions, are you? It's all Dad's fault. You don't need to feel guilty. We don't need to hold back. As we watch Dad face the consequences, he's getting what he deserves. So it's only fair that we make sure Dad understands the pain he's caused, right? Well, my daughter is actually the smartest kid in the USA. Her intelligence has amazed adults since she was little. She probably already has a plan in mind for this. Just wait, Mom. I promise I'll make Dad regret what he did. With that, Emily wore a mischievous smile. A month later, Emily and I had settled into our new routine, just the two of us. The door creaked open, and in walked my husband John, but with patches of his hair shaved off as if by a clipper. The first thing he said was, "What the hell were you thinking?" Dad stormed into the house with clippers in hand. "After hearing everything from you, look what you've done to me," he said, pointing at his patchy haircut. John went on a tirade. He explained how he was relaxing at his mistress's house when suddenly his father showed up with clippers and gave him an unplanned haircut. Then he managed to escape and rushed back home in this state just to give me a piece of his mind. "I warned you, didn't I? I talked to Dad, so you weren't supposed to do anything unnecessary. You know how much Dad hates dishonesty. He's always been strict with me because of that, and it's been traumatic. Despite knowing that, you still went and told on me. Are you jealous? Jealous that we might be happy while you're stuck in misery? Is that why you haven't filed for divorce yet? Then you spill everything to Dad. You're truly pathetic. The reason I cheated was because I couldn't stand the sight of you, you coward. That's when it happened." "What are you misunderstanding? It wasn't Mom who told Grandpa everything. It was me," my daughter calmly responded to the raging John. "What? So Grandpa attacked with clippers, huh? Just as I expected." "What do you mean, as expected? Emily, did you tell Grandpa to attack me with clippers?" "No, I didn't say that. I just handed something to Grandpa, proof of your affair. This goes back a month." "Hey Mom, what do you think is the scariest thing to Dad in this world?" Soon after John left, Emily asked me that question. The scariest thing to him? Yes, that would be Grandpa. I once asked Dad what he was most afraid of in this world. He immediately answered Dad. I had also heard about it before. My father-in-law detests dishonesty above all and wouldn't hesitate to correct anyone behaving improperly, even strangers. John was raised strictly by my father-in-law since childhood and said he could never go against him. Dad said before he left, "I'll talk to Dad about it, so don't do anything unnecessary." That's because the last thing Dad wanted was for Grandpa to find out about this situation. So I'm pretty sure Dad won't tell Grandpa the real reason for the divorce. He might say we just couldn't agree on things, or worse, he might even claim he cheated. That's terrible. That's why we need to act first to prevent that from happening. Plus, there's another benefit to telling Grandpa first. Dad is an employee at the company Grandpa runs. Dad got the job through connections, thanks to Grandpa, and has climbed up to the position of manager. Can you imagine what would happen if Grandpa, who hates dishonesty, found out about Dad's affair and secret child of over 15 years? It's going to be a big mess, maybe even a trigger for Dad to get fired. Dad seems to have earned some trust at his company, but Grandpa is definitely Dad's Achilles heel. That's why I plan to use this to our advantage and push Dad into the depths of hell. But first, I need to gather solid evidence of the affair to make Grandpa understand. Saying that, Emily opened the laptop Dad had left behind. Evidence. How are you going to? Normally, you'd need a detective agency to catch evidence of an affair. And there's probably a password on that laptop, right? I doubt he'd leave anything compromising on it. Normally, yes, but I don't need any of that. There's no point in paying someone to find something that's right here. Saying that, my daughter dismissed my concerns and rapidly typed on the keyboard, managing to unlock it in just a few seconds. She then extracted all the relevant information contained within. Wow, you really unlocked it. Well, of course. This is nothing for me now. Let's see what kind of evidence Dad left on this laptop. From their exchanges, it looks like Dad's mistress was an ex-girlfriend they reconnected. When I was still in your belly, Mom, that reunion sparked an affair that lasted over 15 years. Look, here's a photo. Dad's mistress seems to be this woman. Mom, do you recognize her? The photo Emily showed me was one of Dad and his mistress looking very close. I had seen the woman in the photo before. She's Dad's childhood friend. She got married early and moved away from her hometown. But after her divorce, she came back. I met her once when we visited his parents. I see. So she came back to town, and that's when the affair started. I'm truly appalled by my own father. Suddenly, Emily froze upon seeing a particular photo. What's wrong? Did you find something? Look at this. Emily looked at a photo of a girl who appeared to be the hidden child. Probably this is my half-sister, Dad's secret child. Are you okay? If it's too hard for you, Mom can take over, and you don't have to do this anymore, Emily. No, it's not that I mind. I want to see this through to the end. Saying that, Emily turned back to the computer. It seems like this girl hasn't been officially recognized as Dad's child. He hasn't acknowledged her. Well, that makes sense. He was probably planning to acknowledge her after the divorce. I'm not sure if this girl knows about us yet, as Dad said. It's confirmed he has a secret child, but I found out something else that's shocking. Shocking? Dad seems to have bought them a condo. What? A condo? Yes, a new condo right in front of the station. Given the location and it's a high-rise, it must be quite expensive. Oh look, the price is listed online. When I checked the price of the condo my husband bought for his mistress, it was a whopping $1 million. On the other hand, we live in a rental condo I've been leasing since my single days. We discussed buying a house many times, but his consistent response was renting is more cost-effective. So there was this reason behind it. Is that all the information? I was expecting a bit more, honestly. Isn't this enough? It's sufficient, but I wanted more concrete evidence, like photos of them coming out of a hotel. The information we got from this computer includes the mistress and the hidden child's names and photos, and the fact that Dad bought a condo for his mistress. How about we make a direct visit to the condo? If we capture photos of them coming out, that could serve as evidence. Aren't you curious about what kind of life they're leading? Saying that, Emily grinned mischievously. The next day, we headed to the condo where we presumed Dad was staying. The condo looks bigger than in the photos. Really, it's surprising he had enough money to buy a condo for his mistress. Where did he get the money? Mom, isn't that Dad? Looks like they're heading out as a family, Emily pointed. And there were Dad, his mistress, and the hidden child. I quickly captured their image on my camera. From the outside, they look like a normal family. You wouldn't think he's been having an affair for 15 years. They must be considered a happy family by the neighbors. At that moment, we overheard a conversation from the three passing right by our hiding spot. Hey, when's the divorce going to be finalized? You shoved the divorce papers at your official wife before leaving, right? Yeah, but she seems reluctant. Hasn't got any message that she submitted the divorce papers, even though I said I'd pay alimony. What's she hesitating for? Maybe she still has feelings for you, who knows? But even if that's true, you're the only one for me since the beginning. I have no intention of getting back with her, John. Hey Dad, what about me? I'm more important than that other daughter, right? Of course you're my only daughter, Mia. Yay, I don't care if she goes to some famous high school or whatever. Dad chose me. I wonder what kind of face she's making now, being abandoned by Dad. Poor thing. Hearing their outrageous conversation left us astounded. Then, I thought she didn't know since she's not recognized, but she knew about us. No need to hold back then. Let's not just plunge Dad into hell. But those two as well. Emily seemed even more determined to seek revenge after overhearing their talk, glaring at the three with a wrathful expression. But it's good we came here. We got a video of the three leaving the condo, and thanks to their chatter so close to us, we caught their entire conversation. With this evidence, I bet we can demand a much higher amount, and Grandpa won't stay silent for sure. With that evidence in hand, we went to a law firm to draft the claim documents. For the finishing touch, Emily and I headed to my in-laws' house. It's rare for you to visit without notice, and just the two of you at that. Something happened. Actually, I shared everything that had occurred with my in-laws, Mike and Lily. Mike started trembling and then exploded in rage. Over 15 years of cheating, and he even has a secret child. That bastard, where is he now? He's been at his mistress's place since he left in the condo he bought her, right in front of the station. What? When Dad said, my daughter is only Mia. Only you, does Dad hate me? After living together all this time, he values that woman's child more. And if Mom and Dad get divorced, does that mean I'm no longer Grandpa and Grandma's granddaughter? I don't want that, Emily. That's not going to happen. Even if they get divorced, you're our only granddaughter. Don't worry, Grandpa will make sure he pays for this. His expression was exactly like Emily's that time. He had a look of burning vengeance on his face. And then, a few days after we left his house, Mike, armed with a clipper, raided the apartment where he was staying. That's how we got to this point. You did this. Sorry to shock you, but I have something to give you. With that, I handed my ex-husband a brown envelope. What's this? Open it, you'll see. He hesitantly opened the envelope and turned pale upon seeing the contents. What? Why? Inside the brown envelope were documents related to child support and division of property. Why? You're wondering why Dad did warrants paying this entire amount, right? I can't understand why you'd question that, but this amount is just since you seem not to understand. Let me explain. It was determined by several factors. I think what Dad has to pay Mom is fair. For that amount, I still have an issue with the amount, but this division of property is absurd. Why do I have to sell the condo I bought? That's ridiculous. I thought you'd say that. What? The condo you bought for your mistress in your name is subject to division of property. That's a well-established fact. It's not something you can argue against. What about them then? You're not telling me they have to leave, are you? Exactly. If a house is being sold, the people living there need to leave. You're heartless. I'll throw those words right back at you. After all these 15 years, you've really outdone yourself in deceiving us, you coward. You seem quite unhappy with these documents, but no matter what you say here, Dad's wishes won't be met. These aren't documents we made up. They were professionally drafted by a lawyer we hired. So if you have any issues with the amount, why don't you hire a lawyer yourself and file an appeal? Whether that will be successful or not, I can't say. Hearing this, my husband blurted out, Okay, I get it. I'll break it off with her and move out of that condo. That's what you want, right? Apparently, the idea of paying hefty alimony was too much for him. He said he'd break up with her and return home. However, things didn't go as he had hoped. Break up? Move out? Do as you like. It's no longer my concern. Not your concern. This is about us. We're married. We should talk more. Are you misunderstanding something? We're nothing to each other anymore, complete strangers. What are you saying? But you haven't submitted the divorce papers yet. That's only because I've been too busy dealing with your mess to get in touch. I submitted the divorce papers the day you left, so we're already divorced. What? Too bad, Dad. It's too late. The divorce papers have been processed, and you two are divorced. As for the documents, we'll be claiming accordingly. Damn it. And don't forget about the child support payments. I heard it from Mom. You said it yourself, right? That as a father, you would diligently pay child support until I graduate from college. Thinking back, I can't recall any fatherly things you've done for me, but at least for this last part, be responsible and live up to your word, Dad. Jan was left speechless by Emily's words. Then, that moment came. A call came through on my phone. It was John's father, Mike, probably anticipating that the ex-husband had stormed back to me. He called, and his guess was spot on. Seeing that I was on the phone with his father, the ex-husband's face turned pale. Mike wants to talk to you, Dad. No, tell him I'm not here. That's impossible. Besides, Dad knows you're here, so avoiding him now will only make things worse later, won't it? Reluctantly, he took the phone and started talking. Dad, what do you want? I didn't. Why do I have to come home? Wait just a minute. Hey, what did he say? He said I have to come home because he has something to talk about. Well, you better go then. Go? Are you kidding? If I go to Dad, I'm finished. What should I do? But fretting about it here isn't going to help, is it? What do you mean? Grandpa said you're fired. Why? I don't know the details, but if it's serious enough for a firing warning over an affair, you must have done something quite bad, right? Well, looks like you do have an idea by that expression. Then you better hurry to Grandpa's place. Hearing his daughter's words, the ex-husband rushed out of the house in a panic. It seems his position meant everything to him after all. Dad, that was quicker than expected. I heard from Emily. Are you serious about firing me, Dad? Just because of this affair, which has nothing to do with work. And now you're firing me? This is clearly wrongful dismissal. Wrongful dismissal? Have you forgotten all the mistakes you've made? Unauthorized absences, being late, trouble with employees at partner companies are everyday occurrences. Other employees had to clean up your messes while you strolled around like you own the place because you're the president's son and the presumed next president. It's only natural you be laid off for this. This is a fair decision. But so suddenly. True, I've turned a blind eye until now because you're my son. But that ends today. What do you mean by that? After today, I'm cutting ties with you. You betrayed the two people you should have cherished most, trying to find happiness just for yourself. You're no longer my son or anything to me. Never show your face to me again. No, this can't be true. To my father-in-law's declaration, the ex-husband was fired. Furthermore, being told that their familial bond was severed, he collapsed to his knees, screaming in agony. When my father-in-law told us this, Emily and I high-fived each other. However, a few days later, he did as Emily suggested and hired a lawyer to dispute my claims, but his appeal was rejected. In the end, he had to pay exactly as I initially demanded. It seemed John's mistress was entirely dependent on the ex-husband's salary, being a part-time housewife with a meager monthly income. Hence, I admit to what I've done and I'm reflecting on it, but I can't pay such an amount. Half? No, even a 30% reduction would be appreciated. She pleaded for a reduction, as if haggling at a market, but I rejected it. Eventually, her parents had to pay off the debt in her stead. Thus, even though he got his wish to remarry his mistress, he ended up in a terrible living situation. Of course, the hidden child who was supposed to enroll in high school couldn't do it due to her parents' self-inflicted plight. As for us, then, Mom, I'm going to take care. You too, it's really dangerous out there these days. I know, Emily. If anything happens, make sure to contact me. Even if nothing happens, I'll still check in often, and I'll come back home, even if you get tired of me. Since then, Emily has been attending a university and is living on her own for the first time today. But I'm not too worried. After everything she's managed to pull off almost single-handedly, I'm sure she can overcome anything that comes her way.
My wife told me she's pregnant, but I can't be the dad because I can't have kids. Still, I act like I am. I'm 38 and married my wife, who's 33, 2 years ago. We dated for 3 years before that. She wanted to get married more than I did, so I agreed to make her happy. About a year ago, we tried to have a baby, mainly because my wife wanted to. It was tough emotionally, and my wife wasn't very nice during this time. I tried to cope with her behavior, but it was too much. Eventually, I got tested and found out I can't have kids. It really hurt because even though I wasn't initially keen on having a baby, I started to imagine myself as a dad and really wanted it. Finding out I couldn't be a dad was devastating, but the hardest part was yet to come. I struggled to gather the courage to tell my wife that I was the reason we couldn't have a baby. I was scared of how she'd react, especially considering how she'd been treating me lately. I couldn't bear the thought of her disappointment when she realized we might never have children together. So I waited a few days after getting my test results before telling her. But before I could, she surprised me. Just 4 days after learning I was sterile, she sat me down and said she had important news. I was terrified, thinking she somehow knew about my condition. But no, her news was different. She was pregnant. I was completely shocked by what she said, but I pretended to be happy for her. The next day, I got tested again to be sure about my sterility, and the results were the same. I felt lost because if I wasn't the father, then she must have been cheating on me. The fertility treatments she would need were expensive, and she couldn't have afforded them without my help. So it seemed clear she was cheating. It was such a strange and awful thought that I didn't know what to do. Meanwhile, my wife was busy planning a big party to announce her pregnancy. She looked so happy, and I felt crushed inside. But I had to hide my emotions because I needed to figure out what was going on. I kept everything to myself, not even telling my family. It was too personal and awkward to share with anyone. I couldn't confront my wife either. Too much time had passed, and I needed to know who the real father was before I said anything. Fortunately, I found out at the party. Many people were there, including our families, friends, and some of my colleagues. She even invited our neighbor from across the street, a 27-year-old guy who's a model. He's undeniably good-looking, probably better looking than me or most people given his profession. He moved in with his aunt, who lives nearby, to pursue his modeling career since his own family lives far away. My wife always had a soft spot for this guy. When he first moved in, she'd cook for him and his aunt, and he'd even joined us for dinner a few times. We'd chat about his work, and he seemed well-spoken and educated. He's a literature major like my wife, so they hit it off instantly. I didn't mind him, he seemed nice, and I trusted my wife. But on the day of the party, when he arrived, I noticed a change in her demeanor. Her eyes lit up, and she rushed to greet him with a longer hug than she gave anyone else. While others didn't seem to notice, I did, and it felt like something was brewing between them. I needed to confirm my suspicions, so I pretended to go to the bathroom but sneaked into the bedroom to check her laptop. It was harder to access than her phone, as she was always using it whenever I was home. Whenever I asked her what she was doing on her laptop, she'd deflect and claim she was working on her novel, a project she'd been immersed in for months. I respected her privacy and believed her, thinking she was genuinely focused on her writing. But now, with suspicions rising, I doubted there was a novel at all. It seemed more like an excuse to keep me from seeing her screen. Luckily, there was no password, so I could easily access it. After some searching, I discovered another email account she had. I switched to it and found a trove of emails exchanged between her and our neighbor. They were full of love confessions from both sides, and in the more recent ones, she told him about her pregnancy. He didn't take the news well, leading to a pause in their correspondence, likely because he wanted to end things. But my wife wasn't ready to give up on him. Then I received the most shocking email of all. She told him she'd consulted a lawyer friend about filing for divorce right after the baby's birth. She admitted that the reason she pushed for a baby was to secure alimony and child support, enabling her to leave me for our neighbor shortly after and start a new life with him. Reading that email filled me with horror, and even now, the sickening feeling returns whenever I think about it. Pushing aside my emotions, I focused on the task at hand. I discreetly took several photos of the incriminating email with my phone before shutting down her laptop and returning it to its place. While the infidelity hurt, what disgusted me most was her calculated plan to deceive me. Cheating was one thing, but manipulating me into parenthood to finance her fantasy life with her lover was beyond comprehension. And to top it all off, she played the role of a happy wife so convincingly that I hadn't suspected a thing. Her joy seemed almost unsettling, but my anger drove me to seek revenge. I resolved to bide my time and reveal the truth when she least expected it. I couldn't let her off the hook without experiencing the pain, betrayal, and frustration I endured upon discovering her deceit. Some might call me vengeful, but I felt it was necessary. So for the next 9 months, I played the part of the perfect husband and soon-to-be father. It was challenging knowing she was lying to my face, but her deception only fueled my determination. I accompanied her to every doctor's appointment, ensured she took her vitamins, and portrayed the ideal partner. Then finally, a few days ago, my wife went into labor. Adding insult to injury, she was such a skilled actress that I hadn't suspected a thing. Her facade of happiness was almost eerie, but my anger drove me to seek retribution. I resolved to play along and then deliver the crushing blow when she least expected it. There was no way I would let her escape the consequences without experiencing the pain, betrayal, and frustration I felt upon discovering her deception. Some might label me as unstable, but I felt justified in my actions. For the next 9 months, I meticulously portrayed the role of the perfect husband and expectant father. It was difficult knowing she was deceiving me, but her falsehoods only fueled my determination. I attended every doctor's appointment, ensured she took her vitamins punctually, and endeavored to be the ideal spouse. Then, finally, just a few days ago, my wife went into labor. My heart raced as I left the hospital, feeling like I might need a hospital bed myself. I quickly dialed our neighbor to let him know my wife was in labor, not bothering to wait for his response before hanging up. Jumping into my car, I waited anxiously for my wife's family to arrive. As soon as I spotted her dad's car pulling into the driveway, I wasted no time in getting out of there. I turned off my phone and drove until I reached a motel on the outskirts of town. I'd already packed my bags weeks ago and stashed them in the trunk, ensuring I had everything I needed and wouldn't be caught off guard. The rest of the day was spent trying to distract myself with TV and beer, anything to escape the turmoil. Eventually, I drifted off to sleep, feeling a sense of relief that the charade was finally over. The next morning, I woke up and reluctantly turned on my phone. Predictably, there were countless messages from my wife and our neighbor, all of which I ignored. However, I did glance at texts from my parents and brother. It seemed my wife had reached out to them when she couldn't reach me. Feeling a sense of obligation, I called my parents to reassure them and promised to explain everything once I returned home. I even asked them to bring my brother along, as they deserved to understand the situation fully. I drove over to my parents' place, finding my brother already there along with our confused and somewhat irritated parents. Understandably, they were upset because I had missed the birth of my own child, which also meant they missed becoming grandparents in the moment. Sitting them down, I laid out the entire story, explaining my actions and reasoning behind them. By the time I finished, they were left speechless. I braced myself for a barrage of questions and accusations, but surprisingly, there were none. My dad simply expressed a hope that things wouldn't escalate further, and if the others had anything to say, they kept quiet. It seemed things were calm on that front. This happened a few days ago, and although my family hasn't said much, my wife has been relentless in blaming me for ruining her first-time mother experience. She's been calling and texting nonstop since I left, but I've chosen not to respond. Even my neighbor had the nerve to text me a few hours ago, pleading for us to put our differences aside for my wife's sake and attempt to reconcile. It's unbelievable how they're trying to downplay the seriousness of the situation. He even mentioned that my wife had supposedly rekindled her feelings for me during her pregnancy, which supposedly surprised both of them. But I saw right through that deception. If she was falling for me again, why was he still in the picture? They must think I'm incredibly naive. My wife may be upset, but I'm not about to be manipulated into giving our marriage another chance. She's mostly angry because she believes I knew everything from the start, but chose to stay with her and pretend everything was fine. She accuses me of deceiving her by remaining with her throughout her pregnancy, despite knowing the baby wasn't mine and that she'd been cheating with our neighbor. Update 1. It's been almost a week since the baby arrived, and I've been holed up in a hotel room. I haven't visited my wife, nor do I plan to. Despite my clear stance, she continues to bombard me with texts and calls. I haven't blocked her yet, but I've cut off communication with our neighbor, who's been trying to persuade me to reconcile with her. I'm convinced he's only doing it to secure a share of any divorce settlement or alimony, given their financial dependency. While I appreciated my wife being a homemaker, her infidelity is unforgivable. Contrary to accusations, I didn't push her to quit her job. It was her decision, and I supported it. I'm confident my lawyer can exempt me from alimony once her infidelity is proven, which should be straightforward. As for our neighbor, he's still struggling professionally, so supporting my wife, a baby, and himself will be challenging. Frankly, I'm relieved to be out of this mess and won't give them anything, not even my attention. I hope my wife sees reason and doesn't contest the divorce, but I'm prepared if she does. I've safeguarded evidence of her deceit, ensuring I'm protected legally. Even as she deletes her email account, I have copies of incriminating exchanges. I'm willing to pay alimony if necessary, but I refuse to stay with her. Despite owning the house, I'm giving her time to leave voluntarily. Hopefully, this ordeal will soon be behind me. Update 2. As expected, my wife's lack of sense has led her to reject the settlement I offered, which I found quite generous considering it covered her expenses during our marriage. I'm baffled by what she hopes to achieve, but it's her choice. Yesterday, she texted to say she's left the house. Today, I returned hoping she'd moved in with her parents. Disappointingly, she's moved across the street to our neighbor's house. I'll have to endure seeing them daily now. I briefly considered returning to a hotel but decided against it. This is my home, and I won't be driven out. I wondered why she didn't move in with her parents, a move that would have favored her in the divorce case. However, her father's text shed some light on the situation. He apologized for her actions and assured me they don't condone them. He even mentioned cutting her off after she expressed a desire to contest the divorce. Her irrational behavior continues to baffle me. Surely, she must realize her actions will backfire. Either she's foolish or has sinister intentions. I hope it's not the latter, but with her, I wouldn't be surprised. Despite the complications this living arrangement brings, I refuse to let them provoke me. Thankfully, I'm saving money by not staying in a hotel. It's been a month since negotiations began, and so far, things aren't looking good for my wife. I've gathered evidence of her infidelity. Update 3. It's been a month since the divorce negotiations started, and things aren't looking good for my wife. I've solidly proven her infidelity, especially since she's now living with the man I accused her of cheating with, providing undeniable evidence of my claims. She attempted to fabricate accusations, claiming I was an alcoholic and the reason for my infertility, suggesting that her affair was justified due to my supposed cruelty during our attempts to conceive. However, his claims were easily disproven, as I quit drinking a year ago when we decided to start a family. It's puzzling why she thought such flimsy excuses would hold up. Perhaps her failed initial plan left her desperate, or perhaps motherhood has consumed her attention, leaving no room for scheming. Regardless, both of us understand her slim chances of receiving alimony. It seems she may have relayed this to her boyfriend, as she was recently ousted from his home, along with their child, amid a tumultuous scene of screaming and name-calling. From my living room window, I witnessed the unsettling scene unfold. The moment I saw him forcibly eject my wife while she held our baby, I cast aside any animosity and rushed to their aid. I couldn't bear to see an innocent child suffer for faults that weren't his own. By the time I reached their doorstep, it was already shut, leaving my wife and son in tears. I swiftly scooped up the baby and reached for my wife's hand, leading them back to my house across the street. With a quick call to my father-in-law, arrangements were made for her to return home. In the following hour, amidst tears and sobs, I comforted both mother and child, playing the role of a comforting presence. Despite my initial urge to involve the authorities, my wife persuaded me to let it pass, not wanting further trouble. She expressed profound remorse for her actions, citing her desperation to be with her lover as the cause for her lapse in judgment. She assured me of her readiness to accept the consequences and forego any further negotiations to expedite the divorce proceedings. While I hope she finds the strength to pursue justice and heal from this ordeal, I take solace in knowing I acted with decency and harbor no regrets.
I'm a 33-year-old office worker, and my husband, Tony, is 5 years my senior. We've been married for 7 years, but currently, due to certain circumstances, I live with my mother. You might be wondering how I ended up in this situation. Let's rewind a few years. Tony and I decided to build a house together. However, at that time, Tony had just changed jobs, and our savings were slim. His previous job had been at a major corporation, but he faced insidious harassment from his boss, which took a toll on his mental health. After struggling with sleepless nights, he eventually found himself unable to continue working. Tony sought help from a psychiatrist and took a leave of absence for about 3 months. Despite his efforts, he couldn't bounce back, leading to his resignation. With only my salary to rely on, we managed to get by, but it was a challenging time. After 2 months of being unemployed, Tony started to regain his energy. He began taking care of himself again, and his psychiatrist was pleased with his progress. Seeing him back to this positive self was a relief. He embarked on a vigorous job search, but his resignation due to mental health issues made finding a new job difficult. Eventually, he found a position at a small company, albeit with a lower salary than before. His enthusiasm for the job was infectious, and I couldn't help but feel happy seeing him excited about his work again. It wasn't easy, but at least he was doing what he loved. We had once dreamed of starting a family, but with the uncertainty of our finances, we reluctantly put that plan on hold. Besides, I also cherished my job, and quitting wasn't an option. Just when we thought things were stabilizing, a new challenge emerged. My mother, Karen, was paralyzed in a traffic accident and had to rely on a wheelchair. With my father gone since my middle school years, she had been living alone in our old family home, which was far from wheelchair-friendly. Tony surprised us all by suggesting that we live together to support my mother. It was unexpected but characteristic of his kindness. Despite the uncertainty surrounding his new job, we decided to take the leap and apply for a mortgage. Securing the loan wasn't easy, given the short duration of Tony's current employment, but we refused to give up. With determination and resilience as our driving forces, we approached multiple mortgage companies until we finally found one willing to work with us. With the loan approved, we were ecstatic to finally buy our own home, where we could support my mother and build a new chapter of our lives together. I had always envisioned living in a home permeated with the comforting scent of wood, adorned with thick exposed beams on the ceiling, and boasting customized storage spaces tailored specifically for us. A kitchen adapted to my shorter stature and spacious flooring crafted from cypress completed the picture. Naturally, it had to be a barrier-free single-story house, ideal for easy wheelchair living. The anticipation of its completion filled us with excitement, prompting daily visits to the construction site. Finally, our meticulously designed dream home stood before us. Its ample yard provided a perfect spot for my mother, who had become hesitant to venture outdoors, to bask in the sunlight. Yet, amid our joy, there lingered a sense of dissatisfaction. The land upon which our dream home sat was a gift from Tony's beloved grandfather. Though not affluent, his grandfather held a special fondness for Tony. However, his sudden cancer diagnosis prompted him to distribute his assets, with Tony receiving the largest plot of land as per his grandfather's wishes. It felt like winning the lottery, but there was a significant caveat. The plot was merely a 5-minute stroll from Tony's family home. When we informed them of my mother's plan to move in with us, Tony's sister scoffed, deriding the idea as shameless and attributing trouble to my presence as a supposed outsider. Tony's mother echoed this sentiment, insinuating that caring for the elderly was burdensome and casting aspersions on me as if I were some sort of curse. In the face of their hurtful remarks, Tony staunchly defended my mother and me, asserting that his grandfather's gift should be cause for celebration, not contention. Despite his efforts, it became apparent that Tony's mother and sister harbored a level of malice that bordered on world class. It's truly remarkable that someone as kind-hearted as Tony could emerge from such a family dynamic. To me, he's akin to a beautiful lotus flower, flourishing amidst the murky waters. Tony often remarked about his family, citing them as prime examples of what he didn't want to emulate at home. I suspect Tony's grandfather bestowed upon us this land with the hope that we would care for his mother in her later years. Despite having other properties, he allocated Tony's sister a parking lot situated a mere 10 minutes walk from their family residence. While smaller in size compared to our portion, it already had a lucrative parking contract, offering substantial monthly income. Personally, I might have preferred this arrangement, but receiving any gift is indeed something to be grateful for. Thanks to my grandfather-in-law's generosity, we were able to construct our home without bearing the burden of land costs, significantly easing the financial strain. However, once construction was complete, we extended invitations to my mother-in-law and sister-in-law's family. During the building process, we learned that they had made unsanctioned visits to the site on multiple occasions. Their disregard for our privacy was unsettling. On the day of their visit, they arrived an hour and a half later than agreed upon, offering no apology. Their sense of entitlement was palpable as they casually asserted their ownership over the house, likening it to their grandfather's property. Despite the muddy conditions outside, my sister-in-law and her husband traipsed through our pristine home without so much as a second thought, ignoring the slippers we had provided. When I suggested offering slippers for their comfort, my sister-in-law simply chuckled, dismissing the idea as unnecessary. "It's such a hassle," she remarked casually. "You can just wipe the floor." From the outset, the atmosphere was tense, and predictably, they arrived empty-handed. After touring the rooms, they eventually reached my mother's quarters, which boasted ample space and abundant sunlight. At my mother's request, we had designed it akin to a duplex, complete with its own kitchen, a room truly resembling a second living area. Upon seeing it, my mother-in-law declared, "I'm fine with this room. I want to live here." It was a presumptuous statement, to say the least. Then came the final straw. My mother-in-law remarked to my mother, "You were fortunate to have that accident, weren't you? Thanks to being paraplegic, you've moved from that old shack to such a nice house. Isn't it a turn of fortune?" My mother remained silent, her expression betraying her inner sadness. Internally seething, I was on the brink of erupting in anger, but before I could speak, Tony intervened. In a firm tone, he confronted them, questioning their humanity and expressing his disgust at their callous remarks. He demanded an apology, unwilling to tolerate their insensitivity. Instead of remorse, they responded with defensiveness. My sister-in-law accused Tony of being high and mighty, while my mother-in-law attributed Tony's supposed misfortunes to our marriage. But Tony refused to back down, vehemently defending my mother and our family. Frustrated by Tony's unwavering stance, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law eventually left, shooting me a contemptuous glance. My mother, witnessing the confrontation, offered Tony a heartfelt apology, acknowledging the pain their words had caused. In the aftermath, amidst the lingering tension, my mother extended her own apology to Tony. "I'm sorry," she said, a glimmer of remorse evident in her eyes. "I must have upset your mother and sister. I'm sorry I dampened the mood on the day of the housewarming party." Tony, however, insisted that the blame rested on him. "It's embarrassing," he said. "They really lack decency. But I'm truly sorry. I'm happy to be living with you. Please understand that." As my mother began to tear up, I reassured her. Our new home was close to Tony's parents' house, surrounded by neighbors who had known Tony since childhood. Their kindness towards us eased the transition into our new life. 4 months had passed since that incident, and we were starting to settle into our new routine. My mother's smiles were becoming more frequent. Then one day, I received a call from home while I was at work. Such calls were rare, and a sense of foreboding gripped me. My fears were realized when my mother, unable to conceal her distress, informed me that Tony had collapsed at work. Panic surged through me as I quickly made arrangements to leave for the hospital. During the journey, I tried to remain calm, conjuring up positive scenarios in my mind. But upon reaching the hospital, the sight that greeted me shattered all semblance of composure. My husband, who had left for work that morning in high spirits, was now lying unconscious, hooked up to countless tubes. I was overwhelmed, lost in a sea of disbelief and fear. The doctor's grim prognosis only intensified the sense of despair. "He's in a very dangerous condition," they said. "Even if he survives, we don't know if he will regain consciousness." I felt like I was in a movie, unable even to cry. I prayed fervently, but my prayers went unanswered. My husband Tony passed away just like that. In my state of shock, my mother and sister-in-law showed up, as expected. Upon hearing of Tony's passing, my sister-in-law accused me aggressively. "Did you poison him or something? Were you after his life insurance money?" My mother-in-law joined in, cornering me with her harsh words. "Bad things always happen when you're around. Just like your mother, you really are a jinx." I was too devastated to respond. At that moment, my mother arrived in a caregiver's taxi, tears streaming down her face at the loss of Tony. Seeing her cry finally broke through my shock, and I began to sob as well. As we cried together, my mother-in-law sneered, "Oh, stop it. Can't you quit the fake crying? My son changed after meeting you. Now that he's gone, I don't want to see your faces ever again. They'll appear before us again." With that, she left the hospital. A funeral director soon arrived to help us arrange the funeral. Tony's cause of death was a subarachnoid hemorrhage. It was unimaginable. He had been perfectly fine that morning. When I informed my mother-in-law about the funeral schedule, she responded coldly, "He's always sided with you too, so I won't attend the funeral. My daughter won't come either." True to her word, neither she nor my sister-in-law and her husband attended the viewing. Despite their absence, many of Tony's colleagues and friends came to pay their respects. Their presence was a testament to the love and respect Tony had earned. The turnout at the funeral was similarly large, and I could see that Tony was deeply missed. Surrounded by people who genuinely mourned my husband, I felt a sense of solace amidst my grief. Spending the day with those who sincerely missed Tony reminded me of the positive impact he had on so many lives. After Tony's death, I received an email from my mother-in-law, but its content was so inappropriate that I chose not to respond. She was asking about the amount of life insurance money and continued to email me when I didn't reply, eventually claiming she had a right to receive it. I couldn't handle this on top of everything else, so I ignored her messages. When my mother and I arrived home, we noticed the light was on inside. "That's strange," my mother Karen said, puzzled. "I thought we turned off all the lights." "Maybe I forgot to turn it off because I was too agitated," I replied, trying to reassure her. "It's only natural to be upset given the situation." As I unlocked the door, we could hear the sound of a TV coming from inside, which was definitely odd. My mom and I exchanged worried glances and cautiously entered the house. To our shock, we found my sister-in-law and her husband sitting in the living room, surrounded by unfamiliar furniture and boxes. "What are you doing here?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Without missing a beat, my sister-in-law retorted, "Why did you just barge in here?" "Well, it's your first time, so I'll let you off the hook. We're taking this house. We sold your stuff, so leave." My mother and I were utterly stunned, having no idea what was happening. "Where did our furniture and belongings go?" I asked. She nonchalantly replied, "We had a resale company come today and they took everything. You had some pretty good furniture. We got a good price for it. We bought this new furniture with that money. Who wants furniture that a dead person used? It's bad luck, isn't it? I'm the type to care about such things. Your stuff is packed in these boxes. I don't know if you're minimalist or just poor, but it was a relief that you had so few things." The furniture was carefully chosen by my husband, and I couldn't forgive them for this. My mom was also furious, her face turning beet red, but she was too shocked to respond. I immediately called the resale company. After explaining the situation, they agreed to treat the items as stolen and promised to return them. Honestly, with my husband gone, I want nothing to do with his family, but I do feel a strong desire to stay in the house filled with memories of him. As I grappled with these conflicting emotions, my mother leaned in and whispered to me, "What do you think Tony would say if he were here now?" "Maybe he'd say we should leave." "I'm sure that's true. Tony always used to say, it's worth spending time with people who understand you. But there are also people who just won't get it, no matter how much you explain. It's a waste of time dealing with those low-level aliens." He was, in fact, talking about his mother and sister. I can see it clearly now. If we continue to live here, his family and relatives will keep interfering. So, impulsively, I signed a lease on an accessible apartment. My mother was taken aback by my decisiveness. I asked the resale company to keep the furniture for a few days, and 3 days later, we moved it to the new apartment. In exchange for moving out, I made my mother-in-law and sister-in-law promise to cut ties with us. And so, a new life began with just my mother and me in the apartment. Tony had so many life insurance policies, it was almost obsessive. He often joked, always with a smile, "When I die, you guys will be rich." True to his word, my husband left my mother and me enough money to be comfortable for the rest of our lives. Tony was unable to secure a mortgage when we bought the house, so as an employee at a major corporation, I purchased the house under my name. I ensured that even if something happened to Tony first, I wouldn't be stuck paying a mortgage for a house I wouldn't live in. According to the original contract, the house would be auctioned off if the mortgage wasn't paid for 3 months. In the hustle and bustle of life, 3 months passed in a flash. Then, I received a barrage of calls from my sister-in-law, Jessica, filled with astounding fury. My call history was flooded with calls from Jessica and my mother-in-law, Linda. What the heck? This is seriously scary, I thought. It felt like something out of a horror movie. Since they were being incredibly persistent, I picked up the phone and found out they were furious that the house was being sold. Apparently, when they returned home, they were unable to get in and found a seizure notice. Jessica and her husband had moved out of the apartment they had been living in since Tony passed away, and Jessica had also quit her job. I suggested they move back into their parents' house as they were panicking about suddenly being homeless. To my surprise, Linda had become so involved in gambling that she couldn't keep up and had sold her own house. It seems they had been living together for the past 2 months. From what I hear, they even sold their primary source of income, a parking lot in front of the train station, a long time ago. Now, Linda and Jessica's family are completely homeless. When Linda said, "I'm sorry for everything, let's get along. Can you lend me some money, please?" I replied, "I think it's best if you stay away since I'm a jinx. We're strangers now that we've severed ties." Linda fell silent, mumbling a weak In my mind, I was laughing, thinking, who's the real bad luck charm here? When I said, "I won't lend you a single cent," Jessica, who had been listening to the conversation, shouted, "You devil. Bring us the money right now." "I am a devil and bad luck, so I'm going to hang up now," I replied and ended the call. In truth, I had involved the lawyer for the past 3 months, pushing for the auction of the house. I thought it was an unusual case, but apparently it's not that uncommon. The house was sold without any major trouble, allowing our family a moment of respite. We plan to find a new home with the money Tony left us. Since it's just my mother and me, we don't need a big house. We prioritize security as 2 women living together. So, I chose a condominium with minimal noise disturbance. I remember something my husband always said when we built our home. People can get energy from the sun, so let's create a place where your mother can enjoy her hobby of reading in the garden without feeling self-conscious. With those words, he had made a spacious courtyard for her. So, I looked for a condo with a large balcony where she could enjoy her coffee and read. It's smaller than our previous home, but the room is spacious enough to house the furniture my husband proudly chose. The piece of land that was gifted to us by Tony's grandfather was expansive, and the house sold for more than expected. With that money, I bought a rather luxurious condominium. The security is top-notch, so my worrywart husband would surely rest easy. I heard rumors about my in-laws' family. Our old neighbors were worried about my sister-in-law's family suddenly moving in. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law's family were left homeless. They even tried to borrow money from neighbors. In the end, they couldn't borrow anything and ended up living in public housing after consulting with the community. But they're stubborn people, so it seems the trouble never ends. From what I've heard, they caused a commotion by having a barbecue on their small balcony. Their thoughtless actions must have shocked the locals. Whether due to a lack of money or just frustration, they seem to have loud arguments every night. People say they're causing such a racket that it sounds like things are being thrown around. My sister-in-law's husband left a long time ago, and now it's just her and Linda living together. It's quite the contrast to my peaceful life with my mother. Although we're both two-member households, it seems that the neighbors are banding together to try to get this nuisance family evicted. No matter where you go, if you're a nuisance, people won't welcome you. What goes around comes around. I just want to live peacefully and quietly, estranged from my embarrassing family. I believe that Tony is surely watching over us. From now on, I plan to live my life without causing trouble to others and do my best to live not just for myself,